You won't believe what he said to me. Cancelled my 8 days. I knew that we had to get off the motorway. Had to start like threatening legal action against them. Hey everyone, welcome to Dubventures, where we share all our travel experiences, especially when we travel in our campervan. But sometimes we also document the disasters that we've had as well. Today we've got a big one to share, because what happened to us when recently our campervan broke down on the motorway. The situation after that with the breakdown recovery company and everything that happened, it could happen to you. This isn't just about a breakdown, this is about your recovery cover, and it might not be what you think it is. So very quickly, here's what happened. We set off on our holiday on June the 14th and we was going to Scotland in our Volkswagen crafted campervan. It's a 2021 plate, very good condition, only done 20,000 miles and it's had 7 services. A few hours into the journey, was on the motorway in Glasgow, van just cut out, loss of power, and we ended up on the hard shoulder. We did try to get the van going again, it wouldn't start, and you know, we got the diagnostic kit out and you know, it told us there was like quite a lot of errors and fault codes and things, and like I said, the van wouldn't start, so we knew the holiday was over. At that point, we thought, well, you know what, at least we've got breakdown cover, and when I got our breakdown cover, I've had it for years and years, every box is ticked, so I knew there was not going to be any issues. We set off on June the 14th, and I knew that our breakdown cover ran out on June the 18th. Now 4 weeks before that, we got a renewal letter, and they said on the renewal letter that if I don't ring up and renew, that in 4 weeks on the 18th, it would automatically renew. This, for a lot of breakdown companies, is quite normal. Because I was going to Scotland, I was going to be travelling the Highlands, you know, we might have been like off the beaten track and things and not had any internet signal or phone signal or anything. What I decided to do was, I decided to ring up on the 10th of June and renew the breakdown cover, so that I knew that if there was any issues with the breakdown recovery company trying to actually do the auto renew, because I'd like renewed it over the phone, I knew at that point that, you know, would be covered. Now anyone that's watching this, I'm assuming that you would think that that's quite a reasonable thing. You know, renew before I go, it runs out on the 18th, we're traveling on the 14th, I've renewed it on the 10th. I'm assuming, to like most people watching this, you would think that that's quite a reasonable, normal thing to do. When I did this renewal on the phone, I even spoke to the person on the phone, and I even said to him at the end of the phone call, can you please confirm that my next 1 year's recovery will start on the 18th? And of course, they confirmed that. So we're sat on the motorway, we're sat on the hard shoulder, realised that the van's not going to be able to start or anything. Obviously, I rang the breakdown recovery company. Yeah, I've got a big problem here. First thing I'm going to have to do is ring breakdown recovery. I gave all the information so they knew who I was, and when I was talking to them, they was like, yeah, we can see who you are. Now bear in mind here, obviously it's a very stressful situation. The van just broke down, you know, there's like loads of different things going through my head, you know, everything obviously with the holiday and just like so many things. During the phone call, the person on the phone turned around and said to me, oh, you're not covered.
It doesn't look like your policy is actually active yet.
It should be, because it's just ran out and I've just renewed it about a week ago or something. I renewed it before it actually ran out, and I do have the confirmation for that.
Yeah, so I can see that you do have a policy with us, but it just, the inception date, so you have like an inception period,
right,
and it doesn't start until the 18th of June.
Right. And I asked him, what do you mean I'm not covered? He then said to me, you know, your recovery doesn't start until the 18th, but there's an inception period that means that even if it was the 18th and something had happened, I have to wait like 10 days before I could get the recovery company out. Which again, I know for like some breakdown companies is a normal thing. You can't just like join a recovery company and then like report a breakdown like the same day. I explained to him that yes, I do have recovery that starts on the 18th, because I had rang up and I renewed voluntarily without the, you know, the automatic renewal happening. But the thing is, my recovery from my previous year, it doesn't end till the 18th, and it was the 14th. He just turned around and said, you're not covered. And I said to him, of course I'm covered. My policy doesn't run out to the 18th. Just turned around and said, you're not covered. Now, understandably, at this point, because it was like, you know, at least 5 or 10 minutes into the phone call, I was very, very stressed. And, you know, the way I was speaking to him, I wasn't like shouting at him, but obviously I was raising my voice, because I was like, what? I'm sat on the hard shoulder. You tell me I'm not covered. I know I'm covered. And he turned around and said to me, if you keep speaking to me like that, I'm going to end the phone call. Clearly, this person that I was on the phone to, he did not understand the situation that I was in. In that situation, because he kept saying to me that I wasn't covered, I asked to speak to someone else. He went off the phone. A few minutes later, he came back on the phone and he said to me, oh, I know what the issue is and why you're not covered. You won't believe what he said to me, and he actually meant it as well when he said it. He told me because I voluntarily renewed my breakdown cover on the 10th of June, they cancelled my policy so that it started on the 18th. Obviously, I said to him, I didn't cancel my policy. I didn't want you to cancel my policy. And in what world would you like cancel the policy? And in this situation, think that it's acceptable that you cancel my policy because I renewed early and now I have no cover. Imagine the stress, stuck on the motorway. You've been there for quite a bit already, and then your breakdown company telling you that you're not covered. I knew that we had to get off the motorway. And at that point, I had to start like threatening legal action against them because there's no way that legally they can cancel this policy and put me in this position that I was in when it's not me that's cancelled it. I told them if this wasn't sorted that I was going to take them to court, and you know, it was a horrible situation to be in. So he just basically turned around and said, give me a minute. I'm assuming he was speaking to someone that was above him. Then after being on hold for ages again, he come back on the phone again. He said he's spoken to his supervisors and managers, and he basically said what they're going to do is, as a goodwill gesture, they're going to like reinstate my 8 days breakdown recovery, which means that I'll get recovery off the motorway. He actually said this with a tone in his voice that he was doing me a favour. But do you know what? Because I stood my ground and I told them that there's no way it is legal, and if it went all the way and ended up in court, that they would get away with doing something like that. He spoke to someone and they turned around and was like, yeah, actually, if this happens, they'll probably lose the case. Goodwill gesture? Are you kidding me? This situation was just so unacceptable, it really was. But the important thing for that moment in time is we knew that the recovery company was coming. So, about 45 minutes later, recovery company, they turned up, van still wouldn't start, we got recovered off to the next junction. It had already been decided by then because, you know, the van couldn't be fixed on the roadside or anything, that was going to get recovered to Volkswagen main dealer. Now, whilst we were sorting all that out at the industrial park, that's where the first recovery truck came, and it was there pretty much when we got recovered off the motorway. There was another recovery truck there. This recovery truck then took us, it was about an hour, to a service station on the motorway. Now, we didn't know that this was going to happen, but when they pulled into the service station, they said that there's going to be another recovery truck that's going to come, and that recovery truck is going to take us home. So just to clarify, what's happening? You're taking us to
Johnson Bridge Services,
right?
And then the relay picks you up from there and takes you.
And they're going to take us down to there, right? Okay, right. So when this recovery driver and the next truck turned up, honestly, he was so unprofessional. He came up to us and he was like swearing and everything, telling us that, like, you know, all he's done on this particular day is recovered like 5 like Volkswagen campervans. He was telling us how much he hated campervans and things, and honestly, I didn't want to hear it. Then turned round and he was like moaning and everything, and he said, oh, I don't even know if your van is going to fit on the recovery truck. The next nightmare, we don't know if this is actually going to fit on this one. He's just having a look and everything. And I kind of thought to myself, my recovery company knows what van I've got and everything. Why are they sending someone that they don't think that the van can actually fit on? There were a lot of moaning from him and things. He was honestly, he was just so unprofessional. The van was on, and I had some bags and things that obviously I didn't want to leave in the van, you know, because we had like some food and things in there, because we thought it was going to get recovered all the way home. So, you know, we had some food and things. Brooke and Thor, our little fur baby, they were already in, you know, the recovery truck in the cabin bit at the back. And as I was sorting these bags out, Brooke shouted me over, and Brooke said to me that the recovery driver turned around and said to her, no dogs allowed in the cab. Now, Brooke had already put a blanket that we had on the seats of this cab because it was filthy. And I turned around to the recovery driver and I said, can you please explain to me why my dog can't come in the cab and what do you want me to do? And he said, oh, your dog has to go in the camper van. Can you imagine how stressed, if you had a dog, it would be going in a camper van with you not in it, really high up on the motorway, and obviously the van's like being moved about and everything? That would be so stressful for any dog. So I just turned around to him and I just said, well, I'll tell you what, you can get my camper van off of your truck right now. I'll ring the recovery company and I'll be certain to get someone to send a vehicle that recovers dogs. Because here's the thing, when I broke down on the motorway, I did actually tell the person that was on the phone, but they was too busy telling me that I wasn't covered, because they said, like, how many people is there? And I told them 2 adults, 1 dog. Recovery driver, why can't the dog come in? And he's like, oh, you know, because like dogs aren't allowed, you know, because, you know, they can leave mess and things. And I turned around and I say to him, have you not noticed that Brooke has put a blanket on there? And I went over, lifted it up. Honestly, it was disgusting. It was full of, like I said, stains and everything. And I said to him, I said, look, they're dog hairs then. At that point, he just suddenly changed his mind and he went, okay, yeah, in you go. Whilst on that recovery truck going to our next destination, which was another service station that I didn't know again, because we had to get another recovery truck to then take us like on our onward journey to get to the main dealer. This driver can't take us all the way because his hours are up, he can only take us so far. When I was in there, I was talking to Brooke and I said, you know, the situation that we've got is we know that we're not going to be home till around about 1 o'clock in the morning, and we didn't know how was we going to get home from the main dealer when we arrived at that time in the morning. One of the things that we did have cover for was onward travel. I rang the recovery company and I spoke to them and I basically said, look, you know, the situation I've got is we're being recovered, we're on the motorway now. By the time we get home, how do I go about getting the onward recovery sorted? And after being on hold for a long time, they came back on the phone and they turned around and said, oh, you're not covered for onward recovery. Onward travel means that, you know, if you do have cover for that, in a situation like ours, when you get to your destination, you could, you know, get onward travel. And if you keep receipts and things up to a certain amount, you're covered and you will get that money recovered back to you. But they just turned around and said, you don't have onward travel on your cover. And do you know what, because it was such a stressful situation, at that moment in time, I just accepted it. So we got dropped off at the next service station. Third driver, yes, third driver. We had to wait a while. The third recovery driver, same situation. They turned around and said, dogs are not allowed in the cab. And I just turned around and said, I'm not putting my dog in the camper van on the back of your truck. My dog will be terrified. And they just turned around and said, okay, no problem, let me in the cab. Guys, always, like, you know, if you're not happy about a certain situation, you know, do say something, because, come on, if you've got a dog, you know, you're not putting your dog in the camper van on, you know, on its own. It'll be too stressful for them. So 17 hours later, we got the van dropped off at the main dealer, and then, you know, they had the vehicle for, you know, a month. As if you've seen the other videos, you know all about that. So when the camper van was in the garage and everything was getting sorted, I had a look at the sort of like the paperwork, if you like, of the breakdown recovery that we had. And you know what? I found some shocking things out. The first thing I found out, we did have onward travel. I specifically ticked it, and I'd actually paid extra when I renewed my policy to have onward travel. I also found out that because I was on holiday and was in a camper van, the recovery company, they should have offered me alternative transport to get to my destination if I was like staying somewhere, but of course they did not even mention that. When I spoke to the recovery company and I was asking about the onward travel, like when we got the van dropped off at 1 o'clock in the morning at the main dealer, there's also something else that they should have told me about, and that's overnight accommodation. Because we were so far away from home, I actually had cover that I should have been offered overnight accommodation before I went home in the morning. The recovery company did everything in their power to try and push and push. This experience of all of this, you know, and all the time that we've been doing van life for like almost 10 years, this has been the most stressful situation that we've ever been in when it comes to van life. We thought that we had the protection of the breakdown cover, but what this taught us is that, like, you need to know what you're talking about, and you need to know what it means on your policy when you do get breakdown cover. On the breakdown video, a lot of you guys were telling us that, you know, you've had like situations where, you know, your camper van's broken down and things, and there was one guy in particular, he told us that his camper van broke down in France. And basically what happened was he needed a clutch and he wanted to get recovery of his vehicle back home. The recovery company said no, and they told him that it had to get done at a garage that, you know, that they picked. But because the garage couldn't fit his van in for 1 month, he then had to, after a lot of messing about, he had to fly home. But then when the van was fixed a month later, he then got it recovered from there and got it recovered home. But because he was only covered in the small print up to £2,500, I think it was, for like recovery fees, it cost about £5,000 to get him recovered, and he ended up having to pay the remainder of it. So again, there is a lot of small print, and you do need to read it, and you do need to understand if you do have a breakdown cover policy. If there's one thing that you can take away from this video, guys, is, you know, if you do have breakdown cover and you do have to use it, if they say something that you don't agree with, challenge them, because that's what we did on this situation, you know. And as stressful as it was, it did get sorted out. You know, stand your ground, because at the end of the day, like I said, the main thing here is you can't just cancel your policy and think that you can just be left stranded on the motorway. I mean, come on. And it goes without saying, Having breakdown recovery and going through what we went through is better than not having breakdown recovery at all.